Continuing from the last video, we've learned that although the government's method of income is a noticeably large factor in the increase in property prices, the rise in acknowledgement towards this issue is positive, as there are government groups and non-governmental organizations (NGOs) actively working to combat the housing crisis in Hong Kong. Therefore, in this video, we'll be evaluating the government policies made to tackle the current land crisis in Hong Kong. If you still remember in the last video, we talked about the reason and the method for how the government keeps land prices high. From the interview we had done before with the former LegCo member Felix Chung, we've been able to extract a government perspective. In the interview, he answered some of our questions regarding the housing crisis. With that being said, let's take a look at the interview. To begin with, Felix Chung stated that the amount of physical land available in Hong Kong is more than enough to sustain its citizens with living space, public facilities, and general infrastructure.
First question, do you think Hong Kong has a sufficient amount of land that can not only support housing, but also other citizens' needs and wants, like recreational activities, sports facilities, restaurants, etc.?
Everybody understands that Hong Kong is lack of land, but actually it is not. The amount of land that Hong Kong has, we only have utilized about 25% of that.
However, the government does not have claims over all that land in Hong Kong, which are needed for the public. According to Chung, the government of Hong Kong is attempting to claim undeveloped land in Lantau through a land reclamation plan called the Lantau Tomorrow Vision.
Right now, the Hong Kong government has planned to reclaim lands in the Lantau Island area.
Oh.
And they're going to reclaim about exactly 1,000 to 1,500 acres of land. But that is a very long-term planning. We won't get the land at least in 10 years' time.
This implies that there are certain factors surrounding the housing market which cannot be fully controlled and regulated by the government. Chung stated that a big reason is private developers who hold a large amount of land for their own purposes, such as renting of flats. Chung then went on to suggest a collaboration between the government and private sectors known as PPP, a private-public partnership.
There are some developers, the Hong Kong developer, already buy the land, they own the land. So the best way is the Hong Kong government should work together with the those developers that own the land. So we call that private and public partnership. We call that PPP.
Despite the fact that this partnership has yet to take place, it does show the government's willingness to work collaboratively with investors to resolve the housing crisis present in this city. Next, we asked the government official about some of the solutions the authorities are planning or have already been doing to resolve the housing shortage. For example, the public housing system. This is what he had to say.
The government provides subsidized houses as an alternate plan. Do you think these government subsidized houses are an effective poverty alleviation measure?
Yes, it is. The government is building a lot of public housing. All right. If you can get a flat from the public housing, I mean, certainly you get a lot of benefit because the rent is very low. Okay, compared to the private sector, if you're talking about 300 or 400 square feet of apartment, the government might charge you only 2,000 or 3,000 Hong Kong dollars per month.
What Chung is talking about here is that the government-subsidized public housing is a lot more affordable than private housing, and is successful in helping hundreds of thousands of people living here. However, he was quick to point out the most prominent flaws with the public housing system, which were how long the entire process of acquiring land took, building the structure itself, and assessing each person's background takes.
Queue is very long. Right now, it's over 200,000 of people are queuing for public housing. So initially, maybe 5 years ago, the previous government was promised to let people to get a public house apartment within 3 years. But now it's already extended to 5 years because the queue was very long. So I understand the government is putting all the effort trying to find more land and build more public houses, but it takes time. So that's why it looks like the supply of public housing is never enough for all the demand.
While LegCo is currently attempting to minimize the procedures needed to establish these public housing units,
In the Let's Go, we are asking the government to squeeze all the procedures.
it still would take up to 5 years to get a flat in a public housing unit, if not 10. Our next notable question is about whether the government is actively worsening the current housing crisis by making money off of land premiums or land receipts, which is the money the government makes off selling land. This is something we already have explored in the last video, but we still wanted to get an authority's perspective on the issue. His response was straightforward and honest. He stated that the government is indeed making a lot of money off of land sales, rental fees, etc.
One of the major income for the government is to sell the land to private developers.
He later asked that the amount of money made by the government over land premium contributes towards an overall low tax rate in Hong Kong. And because of that high cost being ramped up by both the government and the private sector, private developers can't lower the price of lands if they still want to make a profit. This is one of the primary causes for the rising property prices of Hong Kong, because the competition between private developers, investors, and so on drive up the price of housing to unreasonable amounts of money. In economics, this is called an economic bubble. We know that the public housing initiative from the government serves as an alternative to only those who are in desperate need of place to live. And it is way too time consuming to be an alternative and competitive viable option with the private sector. So what does the government plan to do about this housing bubble that is on the rise? Felix then refers back to what he said earlier about the land in Lantau and the northern farmlands in the new territories, suggesting that the final solution to the housing crisis in Hong Kong would be to develop newer land at an even faster pace in a collaborative effort between private developers and the government, of course, to ensure that the process of obtaining and developing land is done quickly and that the developers won't continue to increase the price tags of property. He proposes this as a solution, but not the solution. There are still several steps to take that require cooperation and willingness from all parties. This would be the key to making Felix's proposed plan and other ideas potentially work.